What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tattoo Critiques. I'm Pony Lawson, and first of all, I want to thank you guys so much for sending in all your Halloween and spooky tattoos for last week's Halloween episode. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, check it out here. We had a ton of fun recording that, and hopefully you guys had as much fun watching it as we did making it. And we're going to try and record more themed seasonal episodes. If you guys would like to see those, let me know in the comments below. This week, collectors, you're up. Let's see what you sent in. And the first one sent in is from Tyler Martin. And Tyler, you sent in this traditional eagle tattoo that's pretty solid from the first look, but let's inspect it a little bit further, break some things down. So the very first thing that I notice about this tattoo is the very strong outline that you have running around the perimeter of this tattoo and through the wings, and the little lines that you have running in there as well. Just set this tattoo up for success. As we dig a little bit deeper, we kind of find some things that could use some work or maybe some restructuring. One of the things that I'm not a huge fan of in this tattoo is the pattern that is inside of the tree or branch that the eagle is sitting on. Typically, trees or branches in the wild are covered in some layer of bark, where this one kind of looks like it's been stripped already, as we can see the wood grain texture pattern that is happening running through this branch. I imagine this tree's got some sort of bark on there, so we wouldn't really see the wood grain that is going on in here, rather more of a texture of bark or something like that. Compared to everything else that's happening in this tattoo, that just seems out of place. As we move along through the eagle, we get to the lines that are running through the wing, and again, I think these are some exceptional lines. I do wish that those lines kind of went a little bit further into the body of the eagle and just kind of completed themselves. I am a fan of the red circle that you have in the background of this eagle. I do wish, however, that the circles that you used as the perimeter of that circle, I wish that they were just a bit bigger. The size that they're sitting now kind of just seems weak. You can barely even notice that they're there. So if you were to make those circles just a bit bigger, they'd be a lot more strong and it wouldn't seem so much like a perforated piece of paper. The black saturation in the body of this eagle, I'd say is probably like 90% there. There are a few spots in the body that I see the skin tone kind of coming through. Again, it's not bad at all. It does seem like there's a little bit of room for improvement just to kind of really fully saturate that black. You should almost not even see those outlines of the eagle's wings. I do like the sass that this eagle has with his little tongue sticking out and his angry eye. As we come down to the very bottom of this eagle, we notice these red stripes along the bottom of the tail. The outline that you used for those red stripes, I wish was either a little bit stronger or I wish it wasn't there at all. It just doesn't seem that clean because some parts have a little bit darker of a red outline, some parts seem to have disappeared, and then some parts seem to be the same red as the tips themselves. I know sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle to use colored outlines. In this case, it kind of seems like the tattooer struggled a bit with those red outlines at the bottom. And that's because color ink tends to be a lot thicker than outlining ink. Outlining ink is usually a little bit thinner. It lets the ink run through the cartridge or tube a little bit easier, making for easier outlines. When you outline with color, like I said, the ink is a little bit thicker, so you want to use a little bit of water or witch hazel, something to just thin it down a bit to be able to allow those lines to run smooth. And that goes for the red dots around that bigger red circle at the top as well. That's probably why those don't stand out as much. So again, Tyler, to reiterate, I absolutely do love this tattoo. There are a few small things here and there that I would have liked to see done differently, the main one being the pattern in that branch. But everything else you have so far in this tattoo is pretty solid. So thank you so much, Tyler, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo is sent in from Neal Hill. And Neal, you sent in this complete back piece, which is nice to see because we haven't got to see any completed back pieces on this show yet. So judging by the size of this back, you could probably pick me up and break me, but I'm just not the biggest fan of this tattoo. I really don't know where to begin. The texture, the outlines, and everything don't really seem to have a definitive direction or any sort of structure. You know, it doesn't seem like there's any cheekbones or anything like that. The eyeball sockets kind of just seem very round and not any, you know, real structure that you would see in an actual eyeball socket. The skull itself just seems to be lacking fundamental anatomy. It kind of just seems like a cover-up is going on underneath the nostril and above the mouth. I say that because I see some heavier, darker gray areas that don't seem like they belong there in the skull, that kind of seem like they were there before the skull was put on top. I'm also not a huge fan of the pattern that's happening in the background and underneath it as well. It just doesn't seem very clean, and it kind of seems, again, all over the place. It doesn't have any real solid foundation. It kind of just seems like it's lacking a lot in that department. So the background is not helping you out really at all. The same thing is kind of happening on your neck. Nothing is really symmetrical, and again, I don't know if it's meant to be symmetrical or not, but it doesn't appear to be abstract. It seems like it's meant to be symmetrical, and it just didn't happen at all. If I were to draw a line straight up your spine to the center of your head, it just seems like a lot of this is sitting on the left side of your neck, where it should be moved over a bit to the right. And again, the shades themselves and shapes themselves are just a bit messy. I'm almost wondering if it's a cover-up in between the two eyes above the nostril as well. It just kind of seems like a lot of those shapes and shades are meant to be there to help disguise something. I think there's an opportunity to do a really badass red sky in the eyes, nose, and mouth. I just think what you have now isn't that. And I know it probably took a lot to sit through this entire tattoo. I know it was probably a lot of pain and time, and there are probably a lot of people that tell you this tattoo is badass, but it's just not. But thank you so much, Neal, for sending that in and let me talk about it. Please don't beat me up. All right, the next tattoo is sent in by Kat from the UK. Kat, you sent in this pretty wild wolf on your belly. Clearly this wolf loves Jesus. Is he eating his own leg? Are there other wolves buried on his back? All jokes aside, this tattoo does have a very interesting concept, Kat, and it is badass being that big and on your belly. However, there are a few things that I would have done differently, and the main thing would be those swords or daggers that are in the wolf's back. They are definitely looking like crosses right now, so I would have made some sort of embellishment like this sword here that it kind of looks more like a handle. You know, the rest of them that don't have those same handle pieces are just really looking like crosses. The black legs are also just a little bit odd. I'm not sure if the artist made those legs black to kind of give the sense that they're sitting in the back, but they're just not reading that well. The leg on the right is clearly a design flaw. I think the dark shades are honestly the thing that is throwing this tattoo off the most. Even behind the tail, you can tell that there's supposed to be some sort of shadow on that hind leg as well. It just kind of seems like it's all or nothing when there should have maybe been, I don't know, some sort of light shades, or if the artist didn't want to use shades, maybe just some sort of, you know, a lot of lines to give it the appearance that it's sitting in the back. But I think the black is just doing it an injustice. So overall, CJ, cool concept, great placement. There are just a few things here and there that I would have liked to see done differently. Thank you so much for sending that in. All right, so the next tattoo is sent in from Levi, who comes from Budapest. Levi, you mentioned you paid only $150 for this tattoo, which is kind of crazy. Here we have the wolf's girlfriend, or maybe ex-girlfriend, who happened to stab him a bunch with these crosses. I can tell she's a devil worshiper by this pentagram on her chest, and it does look like she has an upside down cross in whatever she has in her hand, so things are starting to make sense. But in all seriousness, this thing is super fire. It's very well done. The application that is shown here is top notch. So lavender and light blues and things like that tend to be very difficult to have a nice smooth tone, and the artist really nailed it here. The gradient that's in the shirt, the gradient that's in the shorts and the tail and in everything, you know, you can really tell that the artist knew what they were doing here. The one thing I'm not a huge fan of is I'm not sure if they're shadows or cuffs on this wolf's wrist, but it seems like whatever line is on her right wrist is intersecting with the hair that's running through the back. So a minor detail flaw here, not that big of a deal. It just seems like the things that are happening on her wrist aren't shadows because of those outlines that are there. It leads me to believe that there's some sort of cuff. And if that's the case, I wouldn't have put that outline right next to the outline that is running back from her hair. I would have somehow shifted those lines away from each other just so they're not, you know, running right into each other. The spiked collar is a nice little addition. You know, if that weren't there, I feel like her punky spunky attitude wouldn't be as much. As far as the bottom of the tattoo, where it's kind of just ends, I'm not sure of another way that would really help end that tattoo aside from adding some foreground that goes into the background. However, if that's just what you wanted, then I think that's a completely acceptable way to end the tattoo. Overall, solid job. There is not much that I would change here aside from those few small tweaks. But thank you so much, Levi, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo is sent in by Ben. And Ben, you sent in this pretty dope skull and roses tattoo. So the first thing I want to talk about is the line weight, since that's mainly what this tattoo is comprised of. As you know, I'm a huge fan of big, bold, structural lines, accompanied by smaller, thinner lines that help give shape. A tattoo like this, I love when an artist can show a lot with a little. And what I mean by that is, it seems like the artist didn't use a whole lot of ink on this one, rather let the skin tone do the work for him. Something else that I noticed that I really liked about this tattoo was the way that the artist attacked the stipple shading inside of these eyeball cavities. Each of these fragments were shaded differently because they're catching lights from different angles. So if you look up at the top one on the right, this one is shaded almost all black because it's tucked up in the eye and almost angled downward. But if you look at this one down here and the one below it, It's got a lot of skin tone coming through, so you can tell that this is catching light a lot easier than the ones on top. Something I wish the artist did do was strengthen in that line that's on the bottom side of the upper part of the eyeball cavity. Right now it just seems kind of thin and weak, where you have heavier lines even running around it. It just kind of take away from it being a ridge. If you had that nice strong outline right there, it would really help set that ridge of the eyebrow forward, making that eyeball cavity sit just a bit deeper. There are also a couple lines in the rows up top that I'm not a huge fan of. I just think these lines could have been tapered off a little bit more. They kind of come to an abrupt end. If they had been tapered off just a little bit softer, it would have given it some more depth. This one at the top left is a good example of how those lines should end, kind of disappearing into the body of the rose. Also, if we look to the bottom of this tattoo, it seems like the bottom rose just isn't as clean or as soft as the top rose. It doesn't seem as controlled. But overall, again, this is a tattoo that I do enjoy looking at. I would be happy to wear it. There are just a few things that I would have done differently as an artist. So thank you so much, Ben, for sending that in. All right, that's going to be it for this week's critiques. But before we go, you know we got to talk about my favorite tattoo of the episode, which was sent in by Levi. Levi, again, this tattoo just really has it all. It's got all the right pieces in all the right places. The saturation that you've got in those very difficult colors really helps it edge out the rest of the tattoos that we've seen this week. And even if you didn't take home this week's favorite tattoo, the fact that you only paid $150 for this tattoo really makes you a winner. So thanks again, Levi, and congrats. Oh, but before we go, I want to make sure to share with you guys my featured artist of the week, which is Ralf Nonnweiler. Ralf reigns from Germany, and he specializes in photorealism. He's somebody that I speak with fairly regularly, and we bounce a lot of ideas back and forth from each other, and he spends an insane amount of time in his tattoos, and you can tell. His attention to detail is unmatched, and I'd even go out on a limb here and say he's probably one of the better artists in the world. I'm actually fortunate enough and super excited to be going out to Ralph's shop in Germany next year to watch over his shoulder and learn some things. Maybe I'll see you guys there. So make sure you head over to his page, give him a follow, let him know I sent you. All right, that's gonna be it for this week's episode. While you're here, make sure to subscribe, share this video with your friends, and more importantly, hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we put up another video. Thank you so much for joining me to the very end of this video, and I will see you all next week. Peace.